Class, and welcome to the year-end review. I will suggest that if you haven't already, please print off the handout with all of the lessons in it. That's called the year-end review booklet, and there's also another booklet which is your practice booklet, which is going to be just copies of practice tests from all the different units, okay? So that's what we're going to do for year-end. Each day we're going to be going over a unit, and then your homework will be doing the practice test that's in the separate booklet. So if your teacher has not provided that with you, please look on my website and print those off. It'd be easier just to fill this stuff in for review than having to write everything out. All right, so taking a look at Unit 1 today, Intro to Functions. Well, first of all, we take a look at relations. Relations can be classified as linear or nonlinear. And when we take a look at nonlinear, we can break that into two parts. We can break that into quadratics, so just put quad for short form because I have a little bit limited room, and exponentials. Okay? You will deal a whole unit in exponentials in grade 11, and hopefully your teacher has introduced them to you. I know if you've been in my class, Miss R's class, you will have been exposed to those already. Okay? If you forgot, here, let's take a look at a graph at these. So a relationship, what does the graph look like when you have a linear relationship? Well, please remember that it's a straight line. Okay? So you might want to write in straight line. Okay? Whereas if it's nonlinear, ladies and gentlemen, it's going to be a curved line. Okay? So I'm going to draw two different examples here. So quadratics, hopefully remember it's the parabola, and a vertex can be anywhere, and it either opens up or down. Okay? And that's a parabola. So a quadratic graph is a parabola, whereas exponential, ladies and gentlemen, has what's called an exponential curve. Hopefully remember doing the swoosh. Okay? And you'll deal more with that in grade 11. All right, taking a look at the equation. The equation, ladies and gentlemen, for a linear relation, you should remember y equals mx plus b. And hopefully you remember that if you're trying to identify from an equation that it has no exponents in it, or no visible exponents. Okay, so I'm going to put down here no exponents. Okay? Whereas for a quadratic, guys, I'll put the standard form down, which is y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. And what do we notice with this, ladies and gentlemen? It's going to be an exponent of 2 for quadratic. Okay? And taking a look at an exponential, ladies and gentlemen, you may have been introduced earlier. If not, y equals c a to the x. Okay, c is your initial value, a is your base, and x, which is your independent variable, is in the exponent. So the way you can tell if you've got an exponential function is x itself is the exponent. Okay, so x is the exponent. All right, table of values. What does each tell us? So for a linear relation, ladies and gentlemen, you would do table of values, and it would tell you that the first differences is the same. Okay, so that's the change in x and the change in y. We call those first differences, and they are the same or constant, and that's the first diffs. Okay? Taking a look at a quadratic, ladies and gentlemen, you will notice that the first diffs are variable. Okay, so first diffs or differences are variable, meaning not the same. Okay, but second differences are constant. Okay, and for exponential, folks, both first and second differences are variable. So both first and second differences are variable. And you will learn, just a little heads up here, you'll learn about doing what's called a y ratio in grade 11, and it has the equal y ratio. But we'll save that for grade 11. All right. B, what is a function? Okay, well, it's the definition. Okay, well, first of all, a function is a relation And most of you are going to say where it passes the vertical line test, but we got to take a look at what makes it pass the vertical line test. So that's not the definition, but that's a rule we use to test it, okay? So it's a relation where, okay, every x or independent variable has only one y value. Okay, remember the short form, each x has only one y. Okay, now it says, how can you tell when given a graph? Well, when it passes the vertical line test. Okay, and you can write VLT on your exam, okay with that, but if you forget the short form, it's called vertical line test. I know it's been a while since we've done this, ladies and gentlemen, so we're going to go over it down below. Okay, and if you've got data points or a table of values, just remember the shortcut I told you. Each x has only one y. Okay, so each x value has only one y value. Let's try a couple here. Is this a function? So looking at my table of values, does each x have only one y? And the answer is yes. So that makes that a function. Taking a look at the second one, ladies and gentlemen. In order to do this, I'm just going to quickly, because I can, use some technology here. Okay, and I'm going to select my vertical line, and as I go, hopefully, as I go from left to right, it only hits the line at one point. Okay, so that tells me yes, this passes the vertical line test, so yes, this is a function. Okay, take a look at example C. Does each x have only one y? Here's a case where it doesn't. Please note why. When you have an x that's 2, you have a y value of 6 or 8. So no, this is not a function. Okay, and last example, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to take my vertical line test, move it over for D because it's a graph. And notice where I have it here, ladies and gentlemen, that it hits at not just one spot, but at 2 spots. So no, this is not a function because it does not pass the vertical line test. All right, I'm just going to move that back out. Actually, I'll leave it there. That's fine. Part C, graphing functions and creating equations. Okay, so number 1, I create an equation. So first of all, we got to decide if this is linear or non-linear before we decide to create an equation. So we're going to do the first differences first. So remember, if we do it on the right side, that's delta y. On the left side, that's delta x. So the first difference is for the x is 1, but what's happening here for the y? Remember, it's the lower subtract the upper, so 1 minus 2 is negative 1, 2 minus 3 is negative 1. And what do you notice? They are. So therefore, we know it's what? Linear. Once we know it's linear, then we can come up with the equation. So for linear, we need y equals mx plus b. We need to sub in the m part and the b part. Well, what's the easiest thing to find from our table of values, folks? Is your y-intercept. That occurs when x equals 0. So that tells me b equals 3. Now, in order to do slope, folks, slope equals rise over run, but it also, when you have a table of values, equals delta y over delta x. So plug in what we know. Delta y is negative 1 over change in x, which is 1. So that's just going to equal negative 1. So we've got m equaling negative 1. We now have b equaling 3. So now we can plug it in to get the equation. So therefore, y equals m, which is negative 1, or just negative x plus b, which is 3. So there is your equation. Okay, now it says to graph this function. All right, well, we already know that to start off with, our y-intercept is 3. Okay, so we're going to plot a point at 3. Our slope equals rise over run. Okay, and oh, sorry, not run. Okay, so what do we need to do? We know that if m equals -1, put that in a fraction, it's going to be -1 over 1. So I know my denominator is run because we always run left to right. But when you rise and it's a -1, you're actually going to do what? Fall 1. And I'm doing this for our step pattern. So from my y-intercept, which is 3 here, I'm going to go down 1 over 1, down 1 over 1, down 1 over 1. Okay? And then I'm going to use my graphing techniques here to draw a line all the way through. Okay? And I'm just going to select it so that I can put arrows on both ends. So just remember, for communication on your final exam, you have to have, if it's straight, for linear, it's straight line. You want to make sure you got arrows on both ends, and you want to make sure you got the equation labeled on it. So y equals -x plus 3. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that ends lesson review for number 1, or for unit 1, which is Intro to Functions. Have a great day and see me if you need any more help. And please study hard for your exam.